Suno, the AI music generator that's been dodging questions about its training data for years, just got its answer leaked. A hacker broke into the company using an employee's stolen credentials and walked out with source code, and that code spells out exactly where the training audio came from. And spoiler alert, it's basically everywhere you'd expect, and none of it looks licensed. So here's the situation, okay? Suno is one of the big players in generative music. You type out a prompt and it spits out a full song with vocals, instruments, the whole works. The music industry has been suing them for a while now, alleging mass copyright infringement. And Suno's response has always been this kind of vague hand waving about publicly available data. Well, the leaked code reportedly shows scraping pipelines pointed straight at YouTube, Deezer, and Genius. That's decades of audio, lyrics, and metadata pulled without permission from platforms that explicitly forbid this. So why does this matter? Why am I bringing this up? Well, because up until now, the copyright cases against Suno were built on inference, okay? Lawyers were basically saying your model can reproduce Mariah Carey, so you must have trained it on Mariah Carey. But now there's apparent source code evidence of the actual song scraping infrastructure. And that's a completely different conversation in the courtroom now. The evidence angle is what's going to really make this ugly, okay? YouTube's terms of service ban automated downloading. Also, for those of you that don't know, Deezer is a paid streaming service. Genius has also fought scraping lawsuits before, famously against Google, too. If this code shows Suno is systematically bypassing all three, that's not a gray area. That's a pattern of law breaking here, okay? So what do I expect next? Well, I expect the RIAA and the major labels to amend their existing complaints pretty fast. I would expect discovery requests aimed directly at this leaked material as well. And I would also expect other AI audio companies to quietly audit their own pipelines this week, okay? The takeaway here is, though, if you're building anything on top of generative AI, your training data provenance is going to end up in court eventually, okay? Assume it, so document it now, because one stolen laptop can undo years of careful public messaging. The White House just stood up a new federal clearinghouse for AI-driven cyber threat sharing, and it's called Gold Eagle. It was created through an executive order last month, and the administration says it's already pulling in threat intelligence and helping prioritize which vulnerabilities get patched first. So let's break down what this actually is and whether it's actually going to matter. So Gold Eagle is going to be managed by the Department of the Treasury with contributions from CISA and the Department of Homeland Security. And their pitch is actually pretty simple. It's a two-way pipe between the federal government and the private sector, specifically for AI-related cyber threats and vulnerabilities. So think of this as like a ISAC-style hub, but with AI baked into both the threat model and the triage process. The AI piece is doing the sorting, which is really helping analysts figure out which bugs are on fire, ones that have like demos or POCs, or ones that maybe we can wait on, you know? And this actually really does matter because, well, vulnerability coordination in the federal space has historically been a nightmare. You've got CVEs piling up, Kev catalogs that lag, and private companies sitting on threat intel that they don't want to share with their competitors. So Gold Eagle is trying to centralize that fire hose specifically for AI systems, which are getting attacked in ways that like traditional vulnerability management systems just weren't really built for. You know, things like, prompt injection or model poisoning or agent hijacking. Yeah, this stuff doesn't really neatly fit into the CVSS score, right? And here's the evidence. It's actually starting to move, okay? The administration says that the clearinghouse is already actively receiving intel and then prioritizing the patches. Right now, we're not talking like 6 months from now. We're talking like right now it's happening. Okay. That's really faster than most federal programs get off the ground. So this is actually kind of impressive. So what do we expect next? Well, I would watch for the private sector partners to actually sign up for this stuff. I think it's going to work. The value here is with any sort of clearinghouse is entirely dependent on who's contributing. So if the big AI labs and the cloud providers participate, this could actually work. And if they don't, it's just another government portal collecting dust. So the takeaway here, folks, if your organization runs AI systems in production, start asking whether your vendors are plugged into Gold Eagle. That's going to matter sooner than you think. All right, let's move on to our last story. The U.S. Treasury just dropped sanctions on a VPN provider that was basically the house VPN for a ton of ransomware crews. I'm talking about First VPN Services, also known as OneVPNs. Europol says this service showed up in virtually every major ransomware investigation they'd run in recent years. So here's what went down. The Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctioned First VPN Services, its admin, and another separate individual and accused them of helping ransomware gangs obfuscate their malware. This follows a Europol sting back in May that targeted the service directly. According to investigators, First VPN Services wasn't just some sketchy privacy tool that criminals just so happened to use. No, it was deeply embedded into the criminal ecosystem. It was marketing and tuned specifically for people who really, really did not want to be traced. Also, the malware obfuscation operator was hit with sanctions and also accused of helping the ransomware affiliates repackage their payloads so that they'd slip past EDR detection. So basically, they were running a laundering service, but for binaries, not Bitcoin. So what do these sanctions actually do here? They can actually do quite a bit. They cut the operators off of the U.S. financial system, freezes any sort of assets under U.S. jurisdiction, and it makes it a federal crime for any person or company to transact with them. So think about that. Okay, this includes hosting providers, payment processors, and yes, cryptocurrency exchanges that touch U.S. rails. So, okay, if you're a compliance team at an exchange or a hosting company, you've got some new names that you need to be screening against right now. So now, will this shut down First VPN services? Probably not. I mean, these operators tend to rebrand and spin up new infrastructure and then just keep going. But it does make it a little bit harder, and it puts the downstream providers on notice. Okay. So your takeaway here, okay, is if you run a security program, pull the OFAC updated list today and push it to your vendor screening and threat intel feeds. And if your organization pays ransoms, and well, you shouldn't, sanctioned infrastructure in the chain now means direct legal exposure on top of everything else. Meaning, if you're paying a ransom to these folks, you're doing business with a sanctioned organization, okay? So with that said, that wraps up today's stories. This is Andy Thompson signing off.